Hi everyone, lovely to be here with you today on this rainy afternoon. I actually got absolutely drenched on the way up, so I'm really surprised I've managed to dry off a little bit before now, which is great. So we're going to be talking about now how to improve the diversity in your tech teams. And hopefully this is something that comes up in conversations a lot, maybe on a day-to-day basis, with some of the business areas that you work with, some of the teams that you work with as well, as it's something that is of massive importance. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So what I've got here is I've got a quote which it says, companies with greater workplace diversity achieve great profits. Diverse workforces make better decisions faster, which gives them a serious advantage over their competitors. As a result, companies with diversity in the workplace achieve better business results and reap more profit. So this is the kind of thing that we'll see and hear a lot more of in terms of why it's so important to have diverse workforces. Here we've got a BCG quote. So this is something showing quite simply companies with below average diversity scores, 26% average innovation revenue, versus companies who have above average having 45% average innovation revenue. So I guess it just goes to show, there's been a substantial amount of research that has been done in this area and that has been done as to why it's so important to have a diverse workforce. So how many of you here have heard of or used any sort of gender decoders with your job applications? That's a fair amount of you then, I'd say maybe 50%. There's a number of different ones that you can use. So one of them is the Cat Matfield gender decoder, and there is also a total jobs decoder as well. So what this will do is you quite simply put your job description through the gender decoder, and then it will actually tell you whether your job description is feminine coded or masculine coded. And then it will give you different scales. So it can say strongly masculine coded or just masculine coded versus feminine coded or neutral. So this is actually really useful when you're talking to your business areas, when you're talking to your teams about some of the reasons why perhaps you're not attracting as many female candidates, let's say, in this instance, that maybe we need to rethink about some of the words that we use when we're putting our job descriptions together. So again, research here has shown that there are certain words that are considered to be masculine coded versus feminine. So the examples I've put here are masculine coded words such as persistent, ambitious, aggressive, versus feminine coded words such as committed, considerate, interpersonal. Now, that's not to say that only females will apply for those roles with feminine coded words, but there has been research to show that there is that influence there when looking at a job description, even if it's subconscious, as to whether or not someone will want to apply. So it's just being considerate when we're thinking about when we put our job descriptions up as to what language we're using and how inclusive that language is as well. Another interesting point I found was that when it came to men, feminine coded adverts were only slightly less appealing and therefore didn't have that much effect as to whether or not they'd apply, whereas when it came to women, they were less likely to apply. We'll look at some of those figures here in just a moment as well. So I don't know if any of you here, and please raise your hand if you've heard of Caroline Criado Perez, who's written a book called Invisible Women. Anyone heard of that? Just over there at the back. So I'm obsessed with this book. I firstly bought it as a hardback, and then I decided it was quite heavy to carry around everywhere, and I also wanted it as audible so I could listen to it on the move. There's so much good data in this book as to a number of different areas, but one of the things that she actually talks about in her research is jobs and applying for jobs as well. So she's quoted here, when a European company advertised for a technical position using a stock photo of a man alongside copy that emphasized aggressiveness and competitiveness, only 5% of the applicants were women. When they changed the ad to a stock photo of a woman and focused the text on enthusiasm and innovation, the number of women applying shot up to 40%. So that's actually a really significant increase in the same job description that's put up, but just framing it slightly differently. Also, digital design company Made by Many found a similar shift when they changed the wording of their ad for a senior design role to focus more on teamwork and user experience and less on single-minded egotism. The role was the same, but the framing was different, and the number of female applicants more than doubled. So I think it's great when we really look at and think about facts and figures like this as to what actually influences and impacts a woman and a female candidate actually applying for our roles. So one of the things that also we need to think about is our marketing content and what kind of marketing content we have out there. How inclusive is your firm's branding and content? Brochures, career landing pages, social media, how inclusive are all of those things? So whether it could be something on LinkedIn, it could be Twitter articles, but really thinking about what sort of messages we're actually sending out to the market. One of the things that I found really useful is in areas where I've really struggled to attract female candidates, and for me in the past that's been very, in particular in areas such as cloud technology, and I specifically had I remember a particular agency that I was working with, and they said to me, there are no female candidates. There just aren't any. And I was flabbergasted. I thought, how can there not be any female candidates? And I stopped working with them, and I just said, okay, I'm not going to work with you. I'll work with another agency instead. And actually, when I worked with another agency that was very specific in going out to the market and searching for diverse candidates, we found that there are a number of female cloud candidates out there. You just had to look a little bit harder. So a lot of this is about challenging, but also really making sure that you're getting those case studies. So thinking about people that you've got in your teams and your business areas at the moment who are, they might be working flexible, using flexible working, female and BME role models, so that we're actually using those talents to attract more diverse talent as well. Also really considering the presence of underrepresented groups at all levels and showing their progression journey. So really thinking about who we've got, maybe, it might be all levels of the company, but what marketing content have we got showcasing that talent externally so that people want to see people who look like them, and if they see that within your company, they're more likely to want to apply. So I've just mentioned about agencies, third-party suppliers, really ensuring that a D&I agenda and targets are understood and clear with all third-party suppliers so that they understand what your shortlists need to look at. And really thinking about, do you have conversations with anyone who might supply you with candidates to say there needs to be a percentage of your candidates that are diverse, otherwise we won't be able to work with you. And how many times do we actually challenge agencies on that? So again, they're rejecting non-diverse shortlists and making sure that they actually understand what your agenda is for your teams, for your businesses, for your firms, so that they know how your business area works. They're invited to briefings, so they have that understanding there also. I've got a number of actionable steps here for us to think about, and really this is for us to think about how we can actually go out and make that difference when we're looking for diverse talent. So some of these will work, some of these you might find you want to try at some point, but I would suggest that you do try them. But really thinking about prioritizing diverse candidates in your talent pipelines. So again, there's been a lot of research to show that actually if you have, let's say, 4 females and 4 male candidates who are going for interview, and all your male candidates go for interview first, those male candidates are more likely to get that job, or if there's 1 position or 2 positions, than those female candidates. So there is research out there that shows these things. So it's actually thinking about how can we do things a little bit differently, and when we've got a short list of candidates, do we want to actually be getting the female candidates to interview first? Pausing pipelines to allow female candidates a chance to catch up. So this is something we did in our teams, and again it was because we were really, really struggling to get any female cloud candidates into the business, and it was becoming quite embarrassing because the team was very male-led. And then when we were trying to go out for business, the people that we were working with were saying, well, we don't want to work with you because, you know, all you've got is males, and we want to see some diversity, which is acceptable. So we had to be quite drastic in what we did, which meant pausing the pipelines, putting recruitment on hold until we managed to get female candidates into the pipelines. Research has also shown that female candidates take longer to apply for jobs, perhaps, and longer to interview. And that's just because they want to be more considered, perhaps, and want to think a little bit more and, you know, be a bit more considerate about what they're doing because of various other things. So it's really thinking about, do we actually need to pause our pipelines to allow women to catch up and then continue as usual? Really ensuring that our interview panels are diverse in order to eliminate bias. So again, I've had and heard a number of situations where we've had female candidates who've actually rejected a job offer at the end of the interview process. And one of the reasons that they've said is actually, all I met were white males in your interview process. Why would I want to work in a firm like that? So it's really thinking about these things and thinking, actually, when we've got a candidate going for interview, if they've got 3 or 4 stages, however many stages they've got, how attractive is your business area, how attractive is your firm looking to that candidate, and why would they want to join you? So consider which job boards you use to advertise your roles. Really thinking about this a little bit differently and thinking, are there other niche areas that we need to go to that perhaps at the moment we're not looking at? So it could be, for example, we are tech women, or it could be, there's a number of women or female specific job boards that are out there that you could use. There are also very specific job boards out there to attract BME talent as well, and that's crucially important. So it's really thinking about, is there job boards that you need to be advertising on to actually ensure that you are attracting BME candidates too? Value of unconscious bias training. How many of your firms, or how many of you have actually attended any sort of unconscious bias training? Okay, great. And actually, I've heard varying views on unconscious bias training and the value of it and the use of it. And what it comes down to, I think, is really mindset and really wanting to make that difference with unconscious bias training, because the last thing you'd want to do is force somebody to go into some sort of training which actually they've got no interest in and they don't want to take forward. But if that's something that works well, it's delivered well, and it's delivered in a timely fashion, then I think that's something that can really work well. Ensuring that we are creating a company that values diversity, and that's thinking about lots of different things that, you know, your company or your firm might do. It might be things like networks, resource groups. It might just be some of the brand and marketing that you have out there in the market, but ensuring that people in your firm, and so your employees, your colleagues, actually feel valued. And I know the presenters before spoke about belonging, and that's a massive thing now, because we've moved on from diversity, inclusion. We've actually moved on to belonging and ensuring that everybody is able to go into the workplace and have that sense of belonging and feel like they want to be there. If that feeling of belonging isn't there, then you're less likely to be successful, less likely to progress within a firm. Collecting referrals from existing employees. So really thinking about the value of referrals as well. And that could be starting with referrals from people that are in your organisation. So thinking about those people and getting them to actually talk about some of the roles that you're advertising on LinkedIn, making sure that everyone's doing that. And again, I know that just before this session there was a bit on referrals, but part of it is what are the rewards that you can get for referrals, but secondly, there's a lot of research to show that employees who have been referred employees are more likely to get job offers and more likely to be successful too. avoiding the quick hire. I think we've all been there where, you've had a business area that said, we just need this many people. We need 10 people and we need them tomorrow. That's how quickly we need to move. And that is generally when that sort of messaging is, when you receive that sort of messaging, that is when you're less likely to have any diversity of hires, because the process isn't thought out enough, you're not going out to market and really looking for those diverse candidates. So really making sure that as much as possible, you're avoiding the quick hire and you've got that planning process in place. And some of that is by thinking about things like building those talent pools. So it might be that at the moment you haven't got capacity to hire the number of people you want to hire, but that you are going to revisit those candidates when you're hiring again. So also checking interview feedback for biased decision making. And just underneath, challenging and being a disruptive voice when needed. So I had an example on this is I had quite a senior partner in the firm actually send some feedback on a candidate who had really great feedback all the way through her interviews, and very technically competent. And to his closing remarks on her were, yep, she's a great candidate, very ambitious, and then in brackets, in a positive way. And I looked at this feedback and I thought, gosh, I've worked with you for years and you've never said that about any male candidate that you have given feedback on. You've never had to counteract what you've said to say that, yeah, she's ambitious in a positive way. So it's really, and I brought this up with him because I don't think it was done purposefully, but sometimes it's just challenging back a little bit and saying, well, actually, why is it in a positive way when it's a female candidate, whereas with a male candidate, you would never say that? So it's really kind of thinking about the language that we use and challenging when we need to. I also had another example of somebody who said, this candidate is great for these reasons. However, we're not going to progress because she needs to do a school run 3 times a week and it's just not going to work in a firm like this. And actually, sometimes you feel that you do all this hard work up front. You go out there, you put all the marketing out there, you talk about diversity all the time, and you just have one person who can say something like that, which will actually mean that you could really spoil the brand, your firm's brand, and actually it's not a nice message to go back to with anybody either, especially when we're in a culture of really promoting flexible working and in a culture where we really want to be as diverse as possible. So hopefully there's some bits here, food for thought here, and then I just wanted to open it up really to see whether you have any questions or if there's anything that you guys wanted to ask or check in on anything we've talked about.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hardeep.